Yeah. That's what I've started doing too. He's like, I'm so bored. I'm like, oh, I'll find stuff for you to do. And he's like, never mind, I'll go outside. I'll ride my bike. All right. Good morning. Thanks for being here. Um, I don't actually. I forgot to ask Dennis where he left off, but I'm just going to start chapter 12. Oh, he got a little distracted. Okay, we all did. Yeah. How did it go? What did you guys talk about, Dad? How did it go? What did you guys talk about? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, um, I mean, just to summarize 11, he's concluded this fourth exhortation that he's given in the book, right? Of all these examples of faith, right? And I feel like we've kind of not belabored it. We've given it due regard, due attention, but between me and Lee and I feel like Dennis, the sermon and other things, we get it, right? There's all these examples of great faith. And Paul, or the writer of Hebrews, I believe Paul, is giving one after another, right? And he's even including people like um, um, Moses. He's including, by faith, the people passed the Red Sea as by dry land. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell. And then he kind of concludes in verse 32. He says, and what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead, raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins. Who does that remind you of? John the Baptist, right? Being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth. And all these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise, God having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. So the implication there being that their faith prompted action, obedience, and they stayed faithful through all these trials, through all these tribulations, even through their flaws. Think of actually, I can't think of anybody in this list who did not have serious character defects. Moses was not even allowed to enter into the promised land because of his disobedience. Right? As great a figure as faith as him, Gideon was afraid and cowardly, but he obeyed anyways. Samson, we can all think of Samson's character flaws, right? But he turned back to God at the end and stayed faithful. I don't remember Jephthah. Well, which one was Jephthah again? Come on, elders. No, I'm just kidding. Jephthah. Was that? I can't remember. But anyways, there's so many examples. Rahab was a prostitute, etc. But despite this, he's using these all as an example of saying, listen, guys, in our history as Hebrews, we have a great cloud of witnesses. we have all these people that came before us, these heroes of the faith, but they did not attain the promise. Why? Because in God's sovereign plan, He was going to reveal the Messiah, and through the Messiah, now we are part of this grand redemption arc to bring all those who would believe and be faithful, Jew and Greek, everybody, Jew and Gentile, everybody would be all fellow heirs, all come into the promise. That promise was Jesus Christ. The promise was the Messiah. So he's concluding all these arguments that he's building up till now in Hebrews. He's concluding all his arguments now, or not concluding, but he's building them all up to this grand crescendo, right? The crescendo being, why stay in the faith? Why stay in the faith if you're a Hebrew? Because all your forebears stayed in the faith. He's trying to say, listen, all these, he's actually separating true Israel from false Israel. True Israelites, just like what Paul talks about in other places, true Israelites are those who do the will of God, not just those who are Israelites by the flesh. Those who are of the circumcision are not true Israel just because they're circumcised. Those who are true Israel are those who have had their hearts circumcised by the Holy Spirit through baptism by accepting the faith of Jesus Christ. The faith of Jesus Christ is the true faith, and it has always been the true faith. From beginning until the end, Alpha and Omega, He is the Alpha and Omega. His faith is the true faith. And I think that's a good point, as we begin chapter 12, to remember for us today is that there's only one true faith. And even recently, I don't like using the term Judeo-Christian as if they're somehow conflating the two. There can be no bigger distinction than between what Judaism is and what Christianity is. They are two separate faiths. They are not interlinked. Now, I'm not talking about the Judaism of the true Israel that has existed throughout history. I'm talking about modern-day Judaism, Talmudic Judaism, the Pharisaical Judaism of the Hebrews' day, of this time period, was nothing like what God wanted them to be. That's why the writer of Hebrews is being so adamant about saying, listen, there is a great cloud of witnesses who have gone on before us. And I do believe, there's some mixed scholarship on this as we get into this, verse 1 of chapter 12, this cloud of witnesses concept. But there seems to be good evidence that whenever he's saying that they're witnesses, what he's saying is they're watching. They're cheering you on. They're saying, go, be faithful, stay faithful. It's worth it. There's that concept. So, yeah.
I don't want to miss the last couple of words.
Yeah.
Where it says, and these all,
Mm-hmm.
just having obtained a good report from faith, receive not the promise.
Mm-hmm.
God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect.
Yeah.
He's just saying, as faithful as they were, the maturity of that faith is now reflected in
Yes.
what these people have.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that should be an encouragement, right? Because you guys kind of idolize these people in a way, or you put them on a pedestal. It's like, listen, what we have is better than what they could ever achieve in their life, because we have the Holy Spirit indwelling within us through the sanctifying work of Jesus Christ and on the cross. Yeah. Sorry, Hebrews 11.
Okay.
Well, Hebrews 11, 12. We're transitioning into 12.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, Jane? Uh-huh.
Judeo-Christian
Judeo-Christian.
to
Yeah.
me means as opposed to the Christians who believe that we have replaced the Jews,
Right.
that we're better, that the Jews failed, and so Christians are better.
Yeah, we need to be humble, right? Because what does Paul say? He's like, to the Gentiles. He's saying, you're a wild olive branch that's been grafted in. So just like how the native branch is being broken off and cast off, it's like you can be just as quickly removed if you don't stay faithful. And that's in keeping with what the writer of Hebrews is saying. It's like it's all about faith. Whether Jew or Gentile, we are all now united in Christ, and we have to stay faithful to Christ. That's the important part. Not our ethnicity, not our family background, because the Jews, they put so much emphasis in that. They're like, well, I am a son of Abraham. I go all the way. My ancestors went all the way back to the founding of Israel. You know, they took so much pride in that. And Paul is saying, like, I count all that rubbish. I count all that. I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees. I'm born, circumcised on the 9th day, born, study at the feet of Gamaliel, blah, 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 Pharisee of Pharisees. I count all that rubbish for the sake of knowing Jesus Christ. And that's the point, right? That's the point that all of us should strive for, or that's the goal all of us should strive for, as we'll see in 12, the race of faith. The race of faith. It is a race. It is a contest, not with each other. It's not a contest with each other. It's a contest against our fallen nature, against the temptations of this world, even against the chastening of God. Not against, but submitting to the chastening of God. And so we'll see that as we go. Therefore, in chapter 12, verse 1, therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. These are some of my favorite verses in the Bible. I love these verses. And they go along so well. I feel like chapter 12, Hebrews 12, is a companion chapter for me, at least the way I look at it. It's a companion chapter in the Bible to James 1. I feel like there's so much overlap and interplay here. The concept of endurance, patience, long-suffering, enduring chastening, running the race. Also in Corinthians as well, 1 Corinthians, where Paul is talking about running the race that's set before him, or set before us, I should say. These are themes that keep coming up in the New Testament, right? Because it is a race, and it is an endurance race. It's not a sprint. That's something that I remember having a conversation with somebody at the fair who was talking about how they've just been not a good, they believe in God and stuff, but they really feel like they're distant and stuff like that, and that they're kind of lost their faith in a way, and blah, blah, blah. And it was all about what they were doing. And I said, listen, if you love God, you'll want to do his will. And it's an endurance race. It's not a sprint. You can't do all these things in a short period of time and then, okay, now I'm good with God, and just float for the rest of your life. It's an endurance race that you have to embrace every single day. And I kind of gave some examples from my own life, and I felt like I encouraged them because they're like, oh, I never thought about that way. And I did quote from Hebrews 12, and I referenced it. I mean, I didn't quote verbatim, but I referenced Hebrews 12 and gave the gist of it for them. And they're like, that's what it feels like my life has been. I feel like I've been chastened a lot. And I was like, well, submit to it and accept it and continue to run the race. And they were like, that's a really good point. So I feel like all of us need that reminder is that it is a race. that we have to run with endurance. And it is set before us. But it's not about us, it's about Jesus, if we look to Jesus. But this concept, going back to this concept, let's just go back to the, beginning of the verse. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, I got a question for you. Everyone talks about, well, not everyone, go back. I hate using those generalities. Very frequently, we think about what if God or what if Jesus was in the room with you, how would you behave, right? That concept, right? And it is a helpful concept because he is. He's there with you the whole time. But sometimes I feel like we, at least I, can be like, well, but Jesus understands, and Jesus, I can almost like rationalize being like, well, yeah, but he's God. You know what I mean? It's like it's like, I can't ever live up to that standard, at least whenever I'm tempted, and fall into temption, that can be the justification, right? But think about it this way. What if you were in an enormous crowd and everybody was watching you? Of people who are just as frail as you, but they have overcome and achieved this endurance race. They've finished the race. And now the expectation is that you would run the race too. I feel like the Army uses that, the Marines, etc. They use that concept of like brotherhood, right? And everybody, striving together and failing together. If everybody doesn't make it, nobody makes it, that concept, right? I think of it like, not exactly like that, but it is a similar concept to, what if your beloved grandma, who's faithful, and died a faithful Christian, what if she was watching you? What if all these faithful people that you know in your life who have gone on before you are all cheering you on? Not looking at you in a sense of judgment, but all kind of trying to boost you. Kind of be like, you can do it, it's worth it. Go for it. That's an encouraging thought to me. Have any of you ever thought that way about these verses? You have? Does that give you, like, what would be your motivate? Like, who would you think of being there boosting you on in your race?
Well, I used to think about my parents, but to have them looking at me and watching what I'm doing normally tends to make you think about not doing what you thought you were going to do. That it wouldn't have been acceptable.
So you think of them as like maybe judging you, or?
Well, because, okay, so if you're doing something you shouldn't and you know your dad is watching you.
Oh, yeah. It kind of makes you be a little bit, maybe be a little introspective, maybe. Like it makes you kind of be like a little more self-aware. Like, oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I think for me, those thoughts come up, it's more of the people that, after learning what I receive is what's going to hurt you in a relationship with God. I have a greater fear of the ones that I won't see. And I don't know particularly whether it's going to matter. I don't know if we're going to have that concept.
Mm-hmm.
Whether there's going to be no marriage. So am I going to know Donna in heaven in the same way I know her on earth? Those are the mysteries that, but I know of some people that I'm quite certain will not be, if my perception of Christianity is correct. So those are the ones that I think that I would probably dwell on. Worse than just the fact that somebody that you had some concern for
Mm-hmm.
They missed it.
Mm. So it almost is like you wish there was a greater cloud of witnesses. Okay, somebody else. I saw another hand. How does this cloud of witnesses? How does that strike you? What comes to mind whenever you think of a cloud of witnesses watching you in your life?
Well, they didn't go to hell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's attainable, right? It's not something that's unattainable if there's people watching you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, long-term thinking instead of short-term um, impulsivity, or just kind of reacting, being proactive instead of reactive in your faith. That's a good concept. Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, I've not thought of it like you just described it. I'd have to reflect on it a little bit. I think we go back to the audience in Hebrews, and then I believe Paul wrote it. And if you think about how Paul writes, especially to Hebrew Christians, he just has gone through this great list, some of whom would have been acknowledged heroes, and I'm guessing a couple weren't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I looked up Japheth. He was the guy that, he was a mighty warrior. He's in Judges. He later became a judge. He was the one that said, if God did what he said he would do,
He kills daughter. Yeah. Right.
Now,
Right.
they don't know if he actually.
Well, yeah, yeah.
The
But
story is
he would sacrifice his
right.
daughter in
So
some way.
he had a life taken as a man that he was later a judge. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget that now. But Paul flipped the narrative of what was important to them. And so these witnesses, if you think Moses, Abraham, Sarah, they would have not thought of the idiosyncrasies or the weaknesses. They would have thought of the strength, right? And he says this. Then he says, we've got all these witnesses, but they're witnesses for a different reason than you think they are. And then he says, give up the weight, which is an encumbrance. It's
Yeah.
something that's slowing you down,
Right.
keeping you up. And that is their Judaism.
That's the Judaism.
He says, give
Yep.
up the weight and the sin, which so easily
Yeah.
beset us, and then run. And here's what I always take from verse 12. Run with patience. Like the pressure they were having on them to go back. Not to get ahead of you, but when he looks, the next verse where he says, look to Jesus as the author and finisher. You said it earlier, he's the beginning and the end.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote it and he
Finishes it. Yep.
And you know that these Judaizing teachers, one of their great arguments was he can't be the Messiah. The Messiah would never die on a cross.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was the
Yeah.
most. That was
Cursed is every man that dies upon a tree, which he talks about that. Yeah.
You know, and I just the way Paul takes what he knew so well.
Yeah.
And
then
frames it. He frames it in a way to help them with
right.
the struggle they're going through.
Yep. Yep. Good point.
The Old Testament is so full of Christ and explaining what's going to happen. I mean, it's just hard for me to understand as well as they knew the law, that they can have those thoughts. But I have wrong thoughts too, so I'll be quiet about that.
Yeah.
About them going in and coming out. And I think that when people say, my grandpa stood at the end of my bed, although he was up in heaven. And I really believe that would be one of the blessings when you make it to heaven. Maybe you get the opportunity to come out a little bit.
To do what? I'm sorry.
There is a scripture that says that they will go out and come in.
Wow, come in. I don't know what you're referencing.
Why are you looking at me, Jane? Now I gotta look it up.
Go out and come in.
You're the one that's been on fire for 3 months.
Yeah. What you got, Dennis?
Yeah, I was just going to read the Amplified Version, which I think gives a little bit different slant on what this means. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, and then this is the key, it says, who have borne testimony.
Mm-hmm.
So they are not necessarily watching us, but they have proven to us, hey, this is how you actually live a faithful life.
Mm-hmm.
So they're bearing testimony through their lives and the struggle for their faith is how we should do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's two strains of scholarship around it. One is taking that, they're the testimony givers, and then there's the ones that view it as they're the watchers and cheer her on, and I think both can be true. I think both can be true at the same time. I think there is that aspect of whenever you are a participant in a race, who do you want by your side, or know, if you're a participant in a race, whose opinion matters more? Somebody who's run the race before too, or somebody who, is just a general onlooker? It's like somebody who's run the race before too and is a coach, or or somebody who's like, yeah, just do it this way. There's that aspect of it too, of that kind of testimonial effect of it, and both are valid. I think we can gain encouragement from both approaches. But yeah, what Dad said is true, is that looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. This concept of Jesus Christ sitting down at the right hand of the throne of God, which he's already referenced before in Hebrews, or he's made that statement before in Hebrews, is the idea of completion. That Jesus Christ, he is the author and finisher of our faith, and he has sat down at the right hand of God because he did all the work that's necessary for us to now be in relationship with God. Right? So if we set our eyes on Christ, we are capable of running that race now. We are capable of dealing with all the temptations that so easily beset us. We're capable of setting down the weight and the burdens of life and putting them on Christ's shoulders, because he is capable, because he did all these things. He lived a perfect life. He endured the cross and despised the shame, which, what do you think that means? Despising the shame of the cross. I think there's some depth here. Why would Jesus endure the cross and despise the shame of it?
That's so you don't go along with the crowd.
Say what? I'm sorry?
So you wouldn't go along with the crowd.
Okay.
That's the shame, is if you would stand out and say, well, I really think that would be a wrong thing to do. Then
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Okay.
you were the one going against the grain.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jane. Yeah, he's using Jesus as an example of somebody who, in other words, he didn't care what all the other people were saying. He was going to do the will of the Father. He is the example for us of somebody who, despite the shame that was thrown at him, literally thrown at him, and the beatings and the slaps by the ruling religious elite, by the Jews and the Romans, who were mocking him and abusing him, he disregarded that shame. He said, I don't care what you think, I care what my Heavenly Father thinks. And that was just like what you said, Dad, for the Hebrews that were alive, that this was being written to, that shame concept. Remember, these are people that come from an honor-shame society, right? Judaism, Near East, honor, shame. Honor your father and mother. Shame, you bring shame upon your family. All these things. That was a tool that the Judaizers were using to browbeat people into submission. It's like, what would your grandfather, may he rest in peace, what would he think of you following this false Messiah? Look at your Nana. Look at her crying. She's crying and weeping because you've decided to abandon your faith. They would have used that shame concept as a lever against Christians, Hebrew Christians, right? And it was a powerful tool. But he's saying Jesus already bore all that shame. He already bore more than you have, as he'll say later, like later on in the chapter, he said, you have not resisted even unto death. resisteth sin unto death. He's saying, you are only following in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, who already bore all that shame. Yeah. And joyfully bore it. But that joy didn't come in the suffering. It came because of the suffering that Jesus endured. Jesus wasn't a masochist. He didn't enjoy the suffering. He didn't enjoy the scourgings and the beatings and the mockings and the revilings and the crucifixion process, the spearing in his side, none of these things. He didn't enjoy that, but he saw beyond it to the joy that was afterwards, because he knew that it was going to be worth it, not just for him, because he would be reunited with the Father in glory and eternal praise and all these things. Yes, he would accomplish that, but also for our sakes. He saw the joy of this people coming into the kingdom, praising his Father's name, and yeah, it's a powerful image of Jesus Christ, his victory being a joyful victory. Even going down into Hades and proclaiming freedom to the captors. That's an interesting subject too to dive into, but anyways. I thought somebody else had a comment. Thought I saw a hand. Oh yeah.
I've always thought of this in terms of the shame of my sins that he had to bear.
Mm-hmm.
And also crucifixion wasn't the preferred method of how you wanted to die.
Yeah.
That's how I think of it.
I think that's a great point, Sandy. I think one of the great evidences for Christianity's the truthfulness or the veracity of Christianity being the true religion is the fact that an emblem of suffering, shame, guilt, horrible torture, wickedness, it was a shameful symbol, has now become one of the most celebrated symbols in the history of the world. In fact, I would argue the most celebrated symbol in the history of the world. No other symbol has been so utterly reversed in concept, or reversed in not just concept, but what's the word I'm looking for? I'm a little sleep deprived. Totally reversed in how you relate to it. Yes. It has gone from an emblem of suffering and shame to one of reverence and glory. Something that meant death and decay and punishment and guilt is now one that is gilded and put on top of thousands and thousands of church steeples throughout the history of the world that gives hope. What used to give hopelessness and death now gives hope and life. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So there's all these cloud of witnesses. There's all this faith, and wonderfully so, of broken people and good people, and yet came through. But the ultimate point is that Christ on the cross is perfection.
Mm-hmm.
That He is where we set our eyes. These are great. This is perfection.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it also speaks to how God takes things that are broken, that are lowly, that are even symbols of cruelty and death, and he can redeem even, if he can redeem a symbol like the crucifixion, he can redeem me.
And that's your word.
Yeah. Your redemption. If he can redeem an emblem that represented so much bad and redeem it into an emblem that represents so much good, indeed, the faith of Christ itself. Hope of all things. Yeah, right. Then he can redeem any one of us.
So just think about it. I don't know if it's technically Christianity is a big oxymoron almost. That is the wrong word, but
Yeah.
life is found in
dichotomies. Yeah.
Dichotomies.
Yeah.
Freedom is found in slavery.
Yeah.
Submission. Joy is found in suffering.
Yeah.
You could just sit and name them.
By death, death was conquered.
It's
Through the grave is no more.
specifically that's what
Yeah.
he's trying to get them to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know this is hard.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to understand.
Yeah.
But this is the reality.
This is the reality.
And there's two themes just in those 4 verses that we just finished up in James.
Mm-hmm.
Joy and suffering.
Joy and suffering and patience. Yeah. Great, great, great. And then he moves on into the discipline of God, talking about the discipline of God. And again, whenever we think, man, I'm running out of time. Jeez, I've only got a couple of verses in.
Oh, you've got some separate.
Yeah. What comes to your mind whenever you hear the word discipline? What comes to your mind? Chastisement. We think of it negative. You think what? Training. Okay. Like consistency, training, applying yourself, dedication. Okay. What? Growth. What does chastisement conjure? I think that's one that I think that's a word that's really fallen out of favor in our culture. We think of punishment. We think of condemnation. We think of
But I think of loving punishment.
yeah.
I don't think of it actually negatively. I think that
Yeah.
it's punishment that leads to growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not, I don't want to say punish, I don't like that, but
Yeah.
if we're not receiving this training, then we're not done.
Yeah. I think of
It's a bad thing.
yeah. Punishment has a sense of finality to it. And I think in our culture, maybe you all, we all agree that chastisement is not a negative word. But I think in our culture, it has become a negative word. We think of punishment has a sense of finality to it, like you're being punished, boom, you get what you deserve. Chastisement is correction. It's course correction. It's like whenever, and I bring up this, I've brought this up before, but
Can we not have my son teaching about punishment or chastisement? Certainly not examples.
hey, but we'll talk about how he makes a differentiation between the chastisement of our fathers, our earthly fathers, which was imperfect, but the chastisement from God, which is perfect and holy. But even though it's imperfect, submitting to our earthly father's chastisement yields results. How much more will yielding to God's chastisement bring forth fruit? And I always bring up this. I think I've brought up this story before about the concept of chastisement or discipline, correcting, whatever you want to call it. With my son Fletcher, he was very, very. He's a very willful child in many ways, but he's a good guy. He's a good boy. But whenever he was a toddler, he wanted to get into things. He was constantly getting into little, infractions or whatever, not listening. But Sophie and I, we practice chastisement with him and correction and loving, but it was hard sometimes. But I remember whenever he was about 3, I think, he was at your guys' house. They were watching him. And my mom tells this story with tears in her eyes, like from just remembering the fear of how she was going to check the mail, and you have to cross Highway CC to go to the mailbox. And Fletcher was with her. And he's toddling along beside her, and she's getting the mail. And then, I think something happened with the dog or something, and Mom ended up on the other side of the highway, and Fletcher was on the side with the mailbox. She was on the driveway side, he was on the mailbox side. And suddenly she hears a car coming really fast, a truck. And she realizes she doesn't have time because there's like a blind hill right before the driveway. She doesn't have time to run and get Fletcher and run back. So she stopped and she just looked at Fletcher and she said, Fletcher, stay. Fletcher stayed there. Because if he had come any more forward into the road, he'd be in danger. But there's also a culvert behind. So there's like a stretch of like 6 feet where if he had gone back, he would have fallen into a culvert. If he had gone forward, he would have potentially got hit by this vehicle. And Fletcher just looked at her and he just stayed there. And all of a sudden, truck goes right in front of him. And it was like in the middle of the lanes, just going super fast and careening. And my mom, just like cold sweat, runs over, grabs him, But if Fletcher hadn't been chastised and corrected and told to listen and obey, if he had just been like, just ran out there, he would have got hit. And that's why the chastisement of God is so important for us, is because very often we don't see the truck that's coming. We don't see or hear the truck that's coming. All we feel is the chastisement of God in that moment, but he's actually saving us from something that's way, way worse and further down the line that we don't foresee. And that's where the patience, the endurance aspect of this run, this race that's set before us is so important. It's because we don't always see what's around that turn in the race. So sometimes we're running. I know for me, it's like it feels, you're just like, oh, I'm so tired. It's like, man, things are just not going my way and blah, blah, blah. And, you're just like, man, it's like this Christian walk is just so hard sometimes and so hard to resist sin. Not only resist sin, which is hard enough, but also purposefully do good, which is exhausting sometimes. Giving your time, energy, and money to other people, blah, blah, blah. And you just feel weary. And then all of a sudden, God brings another thing. It feels like another chastisement upon you. And you're like, oh. You feel like fainting, as he says later. But it's worth it because that builds you up to the point where now you can endure more that's coming your way. He was training you for that next challenge that was going to come. Yeah.
It was such a wonderful example about Fletcher because that's why that we can have joy even though we're being chastised because we know that's what he's doing for us.
Yeah. And Dad, you talked about on Wednesday. You talked about having Christians we are called to have a level of self-awareness that is beyond just ordinary. It's because that's where, for me, if I actually am honest with myself and genuflect and actually look at myself as objectively as I possibly can, which is not going to be perfect, but as much as I can, 9 times out of 10 or more, whenever I'm being chastised in some form or fashion, and I can be, if I stop and actually be objective, I'm like, I need this. Like, I need this because I'm not there yet. I'm not as patient as I should be. I'm not as forthright as I should be. I'm not as generous as I should be. I'm not as charitable as I should, whatever, merciful or whatever. And in this situation, God is forcing me to be one of those things or more because of this chastisement. And it's a good reminder for us that we need to submit to it. Because he says, for consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. He's saying, look to Jesus Christ who bore so much reviling for our sake.
And I wanted to say too, because I've had people ask me or just say to me that I don't see how you can be happy when you're so miserable, and I say, well, it's not
Mm-mm.
And I don't know if that's what they're looking for or
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
but we can certainly know what's going to come from it and really be joyful
Yes.
that we are getting it.
Yeah.
We may not be happy. Paul says
Yeah.
it's not, when you're going through it, it's rough,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in the Bible it's all right.
Well, he also talks about, and we'll see in this chapter, that a father who loves his children chastise them. And if a father doesn't love his children, if you're not being chastised, examine yourself. Maybe you're not right with God, you know? All right. I will just conclude here. But thank you so much for your comments. We didn't get very far, but we'll dig into it again next time, and more of this concept of chastisement and what it looks like and how to not be discouraged, and God loves us even in the midst of it. So, all right. Thank you. Yep.